Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about really one of the most common mistakes that I see from my clients on speed work, and that's when you watch what they do is a failure to lock out. Now, I don't see it as bad on the speed benching, although sometimes I see it on the speed benching, but on speed squats and speed deadlifts, we see a lot of it. And I want you guys to watch what I'm doing there on those speed boxes. Notice that I lock my knees at the top. I come all the way up and then come back down. And I'm usually taking a breath again on the way back down sometimes, although that might only be on the third rep. If possible, I try to hold my breath for the entirety of a speed set. Unlike our other movements, because of the amount of time that we're moving it, we may not have time, especially if we're not doing fives. I'm doing fives on all of these. But if we're doing doubles and triples, I just go ahead and hold my breath for the whole thing. So I'm not worried about recatching that breath. But what I see tons of people doing, the squats, for example, they will stop short. They will stop with 20 degrees of knee bend in there so they can come back down real fast. And they'll do it particularly when I let them run bands and chains. They'll be really, really bad about it. They'll be really bad about it. And here's what I want people to think about with that. When we're doing speed work, let's set aside the hypertrophy end and let's look at just the force production end. All right, if you are stopping short of the top, what just happened? You decelerated, okay? If we are trying to train speed strength, if you are decelerating at the top and stopping with your knees still bent, what have we done? We have trained ourselves to slow down on the way up. And if anything, this is one of the reasons we love bands and chains. This is why I almost always use them myself. And if clients have them, I prescribe them, is because it reduces our deceleration curve at the top, because it's getting quite a bit stronger. Because usually if we're running bands and chains for correct percentages on speed work, a lot of times we have double the weight at the top that we do at the bottom. So if you're accelerating, it reduces the rate of deceleration, because you already decelerate some if you're using straight weight. And some people aren't aware of this, and that's not intentional. That's not training yourself to do it. That's going to happen to some extent. But because the bands and the chains are getting harder and harder in the final inches, the weight's getting heavier, we have to continue to accelerate and produce force to maintain a similar bar speed. So it reduces the rate of deceleration. Hey, that's kind of a big deal. That's a very big deal when we're looking at rate of force production and how much speed strength we're developing. Right? It's very important. So if you are intentionally doing that, what happens? You're training yourself to slow down faster. Well, that's completely counterintuitive. If you're just going to slow down in the middle, why even bother to do speed work? And in fact, this is one of my biggest gripes with a lot of the assistance work that a lot of powerlifters do. And I try to explain to them, you're not helping yourselves with your strength curves at all. Not at all. You're doing fuck all. All you're doing is gaining hypertrophy. A lot of the assistance movements that people do, I'm like, look, you are only getting hypertrophy out of that. You're not getting any movement pattern carryover. So quit calling it an assistance movement, to be honest. So that's where you're stopping in the middle. Not pulling from a position of where you slow, where you start there, but intentionally slowing down as you approach a weak point, your weak spot in the movement. Okay, that is actually going to potentially make you weaker. The only reason it doesn't is because you're probably hypertrophying from the easier exercise, right? Because it's easier to recover from because you're using a lighter weight. But you would have gotten the same benefits had you just done some lighter dumbbell exercise or something, all right? You would have got a better benefit from doing some posterior chain work or a Romanian deadlift or good morning instead of a pause deadlift. You would have gotten the same benefit from a single leg exercise or a belt squat than whatever pausing you're doing in the middle on squats. It's really, in a lot of ways, it's profoundly ignorant, and yet a lot of coaches still use it. And it's contrary to biomechanics. But let's get off of that rant. Again, it's just, it makes no sense in the way the body works. It's the same thing if you are decelerating on your speed work. Stop doing it. All right, same thing with the deadlifts. All the time I'll see guys stop short on the deadlifts. They're like, especially if I'm giving them reps on speed pulls. right? They'll stop short. They'll be nowhere near lockout when they just reverse it and set it down, right? Because it's faster. They feel faster. But the whole point is it's supposed to be faster through the full range of motion. It's faster through the full range of motion. So what I really would like to see is my lifters pause at the top on speed pulls. Okay? That way I know that they locked it out correctly. So watch when I do the speed pulls here. And I like to, a lot of times on my last rep, particularly as I get deeper into the sets, I like to really emphasize the hold at the last rep. But notice I come all the way to the top and I hold it briefly. What are you going to do in competition? You're going to have to hold it there. And again, we come over to that point because they're going to require you to lock out before you can lower it. So if you're just coming up and reversing and you're not locking, you see a problem there? It's the same thing when people do normal rep work. Let's set speed work aside. You see people doing rep work on the deadlift and they do something besides the deadlift. Well, I would recommend that you don't do a deadlift at all. Go do some other hip hinge. If you're going to skip the lockout on your rep work on a deadlift, you would be so much better just doing an easier to recover from hypertrophy exercise. Okay, just go do some Romanian deadlifts, do a good morning, do a reverse hyperextension, do something else because you're training yourself to decelerate at the lockout and to miss lockouts. You're literally ingraining a movement pattern to teach you not to complete the lift. Okay, and that means you're going to have to be even stronger come meet time in order to do it. Okay, you're hurting yourself. So again, the same thing when we come over to the speed pulls. You need to hold it at the top. Don't reverse before you lock. You need a complete lock, and a lock doesn't mean you way hyperextend your back. I've got some lifters who do that, and then they wonder why their back hurts. No, just lock it and hold it. Particularly when we are running bands and chains. Why? Because it gives you extra grip training. Bands try to jerk the weight down at the top. Okay, if you hold it at the top, we get better grip training. It will give you better grip training. You have to hold that weight harder. It's more taxing on your hands. Also, because we have fully stretched the bands at the top, we get a better overspeed eccentric when we go to reverse it. Hey, that's worth something in terms of hypertrophy. There's a reason I really like bands on speed pulls. Because of the grip training, because of the extra hypertrophy and the traps and stuff, because of that overspeed eccentric at the top, they really bring a lot to the table. So I always tell guys, you really ideally want band pegs on a platform. But if you can't get them, you don't get them. You just don't get all the benefit. But remember, guys, do the full range of motion on your speed work. Lock them out. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.